Welcome back to a Timey Wimey pod where we watch every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name's Rebecca.
I'm Haley.
And today we are talking about The Devil's Chord, which aired May 11th and was directed by Ben Chaucel and was written by Russell T. Davies. We have been waiting for over a week to talk about this episode.
Yes, we have. Rebecca is very kind in giving me grace this week. I've had a roller coaster of a week personally, so it's taken us a while to get here. And I don't know about you, Rebecca, but I have been absolutely dying to talk about anything in this episode. We mentioned in our last episode, which was Space Babies, that when it comes to new episodes of Doctor Who, we're waiting to actually talk about them with each other until the podcast episode.
Exactly. And normally we're we're either watching episodes together or sending reactions right after and talking about it immediately. So this has definitely been a challenge for us.
Yes, it has. And we both recently watched Boom in the past 48 hours, so that adds a new layer. And I'm just so excited to talk about tonight's episode, next week's episode. I cannot wait.
I'm really liking what we've seen so far of this season. I'm having a lot of fun. All right. So my first fantastic fact is that we have not one, but two cameos from people who've worked on the show. The first that we see is June Hudson. She is playing the piano during the scene. She's like listening to Ruby play the piano. She's the older woman, and then she plays the piano and gets attacked by the Maestro. Well, that is June Hudson, like I said, and she was a costume designer during the Fourth Doctor era, during the 70s and 80s.
I love that they brought her back for this cameo.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And obviously, the costumes during that era were so iconic. Like the scarf, all of Sarah Jane Smith's looks. It's iconic.
Very iconic.
The second cameo is no other but the man, the myth, the legend himself, Murray Gold, at the piano during the There's Always a Twist at the End musical number.
Yeah, I was really excited to see him. I don't know why I phrased that like a question. I was really excited to see him. I think that's the first time I've actually seen what he looks like in person.
Yeah, I've seen him before, but I always forget how he if it wasn't for people pointing it out online, I wouldn't have recognized him.
Yeah, same. It was good to see him, and I'm glad he got included because he has been the composer for so much of Doctor Who over the past 19, 20 years.
He's composed some iconic moments.
So many. We're not even going to get into them. We can't because there's too many.
Maybe one day we'll do an episode all about our favorite scores.
Oh my gosh, that would actually be so fun because I actually have lots of opinions.
Me too. Let us know if you guys want to see that. My next fantastic fact is that Jeremy Lim, who plays Timothy Drake at the beginning of this episode, his dad actually wrote instrumental music in the 1980s for the show. He wrote instrumental for an episode with Tom Baker, one with Colin Baker, and then a lot of Peter Davison episodes.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's a lot of fun connections to Classic Who in this episode, which I think is so fitting.
I think that's really fun that they did that.
My next fantastic fact is that Russell went to one of Jean Monsoon's shows and then was inspired to write this episode around her and basically came up with the character of the Maestro and the concept after going to the show.
That's really interesting.
I know, I thought so. Are you ready to jump into the episode?
I am ready. And to start it off, I have a question for you.
I'm ready.
What was your initial impression of this episode, specifically the Maestro?
I really like this episode, and I really like the Maestro. I think we've been begging for years for new and different and exciting villains, and this is new and different. This is exciting. The Toymaker was really exciting. I really enjoyed Jinx Monsoon's performance. I thought they were really entertaining, and I really loved it. I have a few questions about how their abilities work. There was a few things where I'm like, okay, so they are music, but they need music, and so I don't know. There's a few things that weren't quite clear throughout the episode, but overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed the setting. The concept is maybe not the most fleshed out, but overall, I'm having a great time.
So, my first impression of this episode and of the Maestro is different than how I feel now. And that's not to say I felt
Oh,
negative about it, but I'm just going to read you what I wrote down as my initial reaction.
okay.
It is, and I quote, "What in the camp?" Because it was just out the bat very, very campy. And I'm used to camp in Doctor Who, but not necessarily this specific type of camp. So it was definitely like a new territory the show has like started going down. Maestro as a character is very creepy to me, and
hmm
later learning in this episode that the toy maker is the father of Maestro makes so much sense because of the creepiness. And also online, I saw a comment, I cannot remember where, but they likened Maestro to kind of jokerish, and I kind of agree with that
Oh.
interpretation. Just in the mannerisms and the campiness and the whole character as a whole. I don't know. That was my initial first impression. Rewatching the episode, I liked it so much more, and I liked Maestro a lot more as a villain. And this episode, I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about it, and there's no right or wrong way to feel about it. But I was just interested to know, like, your initial reaction.
Yeah, I really liked it. I think that's fair. I think this is really different, so it probably caught a lot of people off guard. But overall, I think we can all agree that this is just a really fun episode, and it's really different.
I agree. It's a fun Doctor Who episode to
Yeah.
just watch for fun.
hmm But we also have a lot of like really interesting moments
We do.
that I'm really excited to talk about. I want to talk about the first scene. We see Timothy Drake giving a piano lesson to this kid Henry, and they play the Devil's Chord, and then that's how we meet Maestro. I loved the knocking out of the piano, and then Maestro like, ta-da! Like that whole immediately we start with a bang, and we realize Henry is actually the name is Harbinger, and then he kind of disappears. What did you think of this first scene?
This was the scene where I was initially like, what in the camp? But the scene as a whole is really interesting and intriguing. And I don't know about you, but did you notice at the end when they're all singing for the musical number that the kid
Mm-hmm.
shows up
I did see
opening
that.
the door?
So I'm wondering if we're going to see that kid again.
Yeah, so I found that really interesting. It felt like that was a little something to take note of, especially because the beginning of this episode is in 1925, which is also the same year the Doctor and Donna travel back to in the Giggle to meet with the toy maker.
I know. I noticed that. So some maybe there's something going on in 1925. I wonder if that's going to come back at all.
That's what I'm wondering too. What were your thoughts on Maestro being able to consume music? Because that was kind of terrifying the way that all happened.
That was really interesting. I will say I feel I don't quite understand their motivation. Like, why are they doing this? And like, how does it work? How is like music gone? But then they have the nursery rhymes, like we see the Beatles playing, and so it's not gone, but it is gone. So stuff like that was very confusing to me in this episode.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I was a little confused. How I understood it is that the maestro eats music because maestro wants perfect music, which is like, I think it's pronounced aeolian tones. That's like the sound
Hmm.
of the wind through the trees. I'm still a bit confused on that too.
Yeah,
You're not the
and then
only
I was
one.
confused. I was confused about that and how like they need every song unsung, and
Yeah.
so I like it didn't it's not totally distracting, just like when I was going back and taking notes, I was like, "Oh, I'm a little unclear how this works."
Same. At the end of this first scene, the maestro starts playing the Doctor Who
Yes,
theme song, and then it goes into the intro. That was the coolest thing and
I loved
very
that.
fourth wall breaking, but that was so cool.
No, that was I loved that. That was so cool. I love Ruby and 15 in the TARDIS at the start. I just love everything about the scene. How she wants to go see the Beatles, and he's like, "That is brilliant." Everyone says Mars or the Titanic. Uh, and then I love when they're about to leave, and then Ruby's like, "Shouldn't we change?" And the way 15 turns around and the way they go get dressed and they're just giggling like old school friends. I'm obsessed. Like their chemistry is so good. Their dynamic is incredible. And I love the outfits they wear, especially Ruby Sunday's outfit. I can already tell that's
Mhm.
going to probably be one of my favorites from this season.
Same. The only thing I have to say that is wrong about this entire scene is we still don't have a shot of the TARDIS wardrobe, the closet
Oh,
of the
I
TARDIS.
know.
Where is it? They have
I
the
when they were
budget.
going to get changed, I at first was like, "Oh my gosh, are we going to see the wardrobe again?" And we didn't get to see it, which was really sad.
I know. We've only seen it once in New Who, which is in the Christmas Invasion. That's it.
Give us the wardrobe. Give it to us.
Please give us another TARDIS room too.
Yeah, let us like incorporate different rooms of the TARDIS into the show. I love the console room, especially the new
Hmm.
console room, but I just this TARDIS is this vast machine that goes on forever and ever. Like give us more. I'm begging.
Show us the kitchen. There has to be one. Show us the pool.
Yes.
We know there's one.
Yes,
At
I've
least in
always
11's
wanted to
TARDIS.
see the kitchen. Is there like a med bay? I want to see the library again.
We need it. We need it all. And the fact that they have the budget now and still haven't delivered is a problem.
It is. It is a problem. I also just love the setting, like I said before, of 1963. I thought being in 1963 was such a trip. Um,
Yeah.
and we can jump ahead because I need to talk about the rooftop scene. I love when Ruby and 15 are on the roof and he points out into the distance and he's like, "Oh, I used to live right over there. I'm there right now," talking about how he used to live on a junkyard with his granddaughter Susan. And I love that Easter egg. I thought it was so great, so fun. I love that we finally got a Susan mention. We get little mentions of her throughout the show,
Hmm.
but this is the
Yeah.
biggest mention she's ever gotten.
Yeah. I would say the other mention, which wasn't even a mention, it was just a set piece, was a picture of Susan on the 12th Doctor's office desk when he was a professor. But yeah, this is the first like actual name drop in so long. Also, he tells Ruby he has children and will have.
I
What does
know
that mean?
that
What do you mean will have?
will have that is interesting. What how do you know that? Like what does that mean? I guess he's just like I'm sure someday and another in the future, but it was an interesting line.
Yeah, so I don't know if that means anything. If it's just something he said to say it. It just tripped me up more than the Susan name drop, honestly.
Yeah, no, totally. Can we talk about how he said he doesn't know what happened to Susan? For those that don't know, the last time Susan was seen on the show was in Classic Who, and the Doctor left her in the 2160s after she met a freedom fighter, David Campbell, and he left her, but he did say he would come back for her. But here he's saying he's not really sure what happens to her, and he thinks that, the genocide, the Master essentially killing all the Time Lords killed her too, which that took me out more than anything else, because
Yeah.
yeah, the Master killed all the Time Lords on Gallifrey, but the way the Doctor described that, I was like, wait, that's not. Is that what happened? I don't know. What did you think?
I was also a little bit confused. I don't know a ton of Classic Who lore regarding Susan and lore in general about Classic Who, but I did remember knowing that the Doctor left her somewhere, and I thought it wasn't Gallifrey, so that
Yeah, it
really
was on
confused
Earth.
me. Yeah, that's what I thought, that it was on Earth. So I don't know why he thought or thinks that she was caught up in
But the
the
Doctor
genocide.
described it as like a cellular explosion across the universe almost. But that's
Oh.
not like we never it never really got explained how the Master killed all the Time Lords
Yeah.
on Gallifrey during the Jodie Whittaker era. Uh so I don't know. That just took me out. I was like, wait, that's what happened? Like that's not how I it was ever explained, but I don't think they ever really gave an explanation other than the Master killed all the Time Lords.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know if that means there's been a ton of speculation Susan's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what to think. It's all just
Me
very
either.
interesting. That much I do know.
Yeah, part of me wonders if she is coming back in the form of Susan Twist, just
Yeah.
because, like, come on, that her
Come
name is
on.
Susan Twist.
For those of you who don't know, the old lady that me and Rebecca have been referring to since the church on Ruby Road, that actress's name is Susan Twist. We will now refer to her as Susan Twist because she's really not an old lady. We were just
Yeah,
using descriptive language. I'm so sorry, Susan Twist.
I know.
Um so yeah, I agree. Lots of thoughts that maybe she's going to be like a regenerated Susan. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see eventually.
We'll see.
Going back, what did you think of the Beatles in this episode?
First of all, I was like, how is this the first Beatles episode of Doctor Who?
I know, so weird.
It's one of those things that you thought would have been done by now, but it hasn't been. The Beatles themselves really weren't in a ton of this. They saved the day at the end, and then they were in the beginning, basically being all sad and emo and being like, we don't like music. We just want to get home. We just want to get our money. Like the love of music was just gone from them. But besides that, they didn't really have that much of a presence, so I don't really have an opinion on them.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were really underused. I think if you're gonna have the Beatles in an episode, you should do a little more with them. I didn't really like the casting as much. They just didn't look like the Beatles. They didn't feel like the Beatles. I do like at the end that John and Paul like saved the day and that they're able to figure out the chord progression. I do really like that aspect. But overall, I think they were really underused, and Cilla Black as well. Like, if you're gonna have these big famous musicians, I almost want to see more of them. That being said,
Yeah,
I'm okay not having a like historical figure centric episode, if that makes sense. But I just think the way they were used here, I would have liked to see a little more.
I agree. I would have liked to see more of them or more of them included. I don't need it to be a whole like Vincent and the Doctor sort of deal, but having some more integration with them would have been nice. I agree.
Mm-hmm. I did really like the diner scene where Ruby and the Doctor are talking to them, and that's where we get the Susan Twist cameo in this episode.
Yeah.
her most overt cameo so far. I really like, though, again, this is another thing where I'm like, okay, how exactly does this work? When the doctor drops the spoon, and then we see the maestro's reflection in the spoon and all the reflections and their smile. It's so creepy and really well done. But again, I'm like, okay, how are they doing this?
Well, no, the maestro was summoned because John and Paul actually started to sing a good song, because the whole problem was that it wasn't that music was completely gone. It was that good music, the love of music was gone. So they sounded
Mm.
out of tune. They sounded bored. They didn't sound very happy. So when they actually began to sing from like the songs in their hearts, that summons the maestro. And then they were like, never mind, this is too hard to deal with. The maestro is scary. I'm not doing
Yeah,
this.
I guess so.
Can't
I
blame
don't
them.
know. It was just, yeah, I don't know. It was just really confusing, but I did still really like that scene.
And I want to go back to talking about stuff that happened on the roof, because a lot of stuff happened in a very short amount of time. June Hudson, who was the wardrobe stylist in the past for Doctor Who, Rebecca mentioned earlier on in this episode, she gets killed by the maestro after starting to play music. Ruby starts to play music on the piano after being encouraged by 15. And when 15 is encouraging Ruby to play the piano, at first Ruby is like, I'm not that good. And he's like, yeah, you are. I saw you back in Christmas of 2023 playing in the club. And, she started playing the piano. I had a theory that I talked about in our Church of Ruby Road podcast episode. We also shared this clip on our socials, where I said that in that specific scene, there's Susan Twist's character and the audience saying, hey, play this song, and no one knows what the song is. And 15 is in the back of that scene, watching Ruby play the keyboard, watching the Susan Twist character say all of this. But he's watching them both, especially Ruby, with a very somber, emotional look on his face, which is a very different vibe than of the rest of the Church on Ruby Road episode with the 15th Doctor. Because of all of this, and he was wearing a completely different outfit, I said I thought that was a future version of the 15th Doctor, which would make
So,
it
do you
seem like,
think he went after he met her? He went back to a previous date before they met to watch her perform in the club?
yes, I do, because Space Babies and the Devil's Chord were 6 months apart in Ruby's timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that
I could
of
see
the
that.
15th
I'm a
Doctor.
little. I won't lie. Them mentioning it in this episode makes me think it's not a future him. But I do. Well, I guess we'll see. But I do see what you're saying. Totally. I love before Maestro pops out of the piano, we hear the giggle again. What did you think of 15's reaction to hearing that? Because he is visibly, shaken and scared by this.
Low-key my reaction too, purely because I was not expecting that.
Me either. And it made sense. And I really thought it was interesting how he said before with the toy maker, his soul was torn in half. He's obviously referring to the bi generation, and he says he can't go through that again. And I found that really interesting. What about you?
I agree. I found that really, really interesting, and that makes me feel the bi-generation. I feel like this isn't the last we're going to hear about it and the effects it has on the Doctor.
Especially this 15th Doctor. Like, he's born in a way that no previous regeneration has been born. And I think it's going to definitely have some long lasting impacts on this version of the Doctor.
I agree. And then 15 and Ruby basically get out of there, because 15 is like, I can't do this. This is too much. This is one thing I can't beat, which is interesting. We don't really usually see the Doctor running away. And I'm kind of confused, because 15 and Ruby go like hiding in the cellar. And then 15, while the Maestro is trying to hunt them down, presses this like setting on his sonic, and it makes the entire world quiet.
Yeah, I really like that scene and like how it felt and looked and
Yeah.
sounded. but I was really confused by that as well.
Yeah. But the Maestro brings sound back. And the Maestro mentions that they now have like sound and vision, which they didn't have both before. So like I'm very confused.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like what I'm saying, I'm confused how their powers work, and I don't know. Things like that. I'm like, this doesn't quite make sense, and I don't quite understand what this villain is, who they are. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a little bit confusing. Not enough to stop the episode, but
no,
enough to wonder. And if we weren't doing a podcast episode, we probably wouldn't even talk about it for this
yeah,
long.
honestly. Moving on, let's talk about the scene where the doctor takes Ruby back to her time and they see London basically completely destroyed because music is gone and humanity tore itself apart.
This shot and this entire scene was very much giving the Unquiet Dead, but Doctor Who actually had the budget to go to London in the future.
Yeah, if you missed our Unquiet Dead episode, which go give it a listen if you haven't, we talked about how in that episode they originally had planned for the Ninth Doctor to show Rose the future in which the Gelf had completely taken over Earth and Earth was destroyed, but they weren't able to do it because of budget and other things. So it was really cool to see they were finally able to do this and show the companion, no, history's in flux, time's in flux. If we don't stop the Maestro, this is what your future becomes. And I
Yeah,
thought Millie Gibson played this scene in that moment really well.
I agree with you. And I really love this shot aesthetically. It was a really cool shot. Like, it was very, like, oh my gosh, like, this is what the world has come to. But at the same time, I just love seeing this perspective of the future. And it was really nice to see that and visualize that. And I really, really liked when 15 said, I think without music, the human race goes sour. Without
Mm.
any way of expressing a broken heart, they go to war without even knowing why. And this entire quote really sums up just how important music is. I won't talk too much about it, but I think anyone listening can agree that music can be this superpower that gets you through anything and everything.
Mhm.
And like I was thinking watching this episode, I'm like, without music or without the way music is, our world would be so different. Like we wouldn't have a world. It would very much be that view of London. And I just like how that quote kind of put it all together.
I like when the doctor even says himself, there's no love songs. Like, imagine the world
Yeah.
without any love songs. I love just before Ruby steps out to see, this post apocalyptic future, the doctor just, stays at the console and he
Hmm.
visibly cringes when Ruby opens the door. And I just loved that choice from Shooty.
I completely agree. I think he nailed it. They both played that super well. But then the maestro just appears and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
everything's black. They're just
Yeah, they're
post.
instantly in a different dimension, space,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And then the maestro starts playing the piano. Did you notice what the maestro started playing? Because I noticed it immediately. I caught it so fast and I
Yes.
screamed.
Okay. But I didn't get a chance to look that up. Okay, you explain it.
Okay, so the maestro starts playing the piano, right? And then, like 10, 15 seconds in, starts playing the master, like drums, like the beat
Yeah,
of
it
the
even says
song.
like the Saxon theme when you have the subtitles on.
It did. And that's how I knew I clocked it. And I'm guaranteeing that was intentional, but I screamed.
Definitely.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah. And or the name of our podcast gets a
Yeah.
little mention.
We get a name drop for Timey Wimey, and granted, it's not our It's not our quote. It comes from Doctor Who, but that made me really
Yeah.
happy. I'm like,
Yeah. Also in the scene, 15, I forget what he says exactly, but 15 calls Maestro babes. And this is slowly becoming a reoccurring theme for the 15th Doctor, and I love it. I think it's an amazing choice, and it's just a small little quirk that just makes me love the 15th Doctor even more than I already do.
what did you
Hmm.
think of the TARDIS in this scene? Because the TARDIS lights are going crazy.
That was really interesting. I love the TARDIS changing colors. It looks so good. But yeah, that was really interesting. I want to talk about the scene where Ruby is essentially tied up from the maestro, and then she starts singing, and snow is falling again, just like it did in Space Babies.
Yeah, I found that very interesting.
And then Maestro says that Ruby has a song like deep inside her soul, and it's
Mm-hmm.
the song from the Church on Ruby Road. Now in Space Babies, when it started snowing, you had said that you thought the snow was somehow the Doctor's doing. Do you still
I
think
did.
that?
No, I think it's definitely Ruby.
Yeah, it has to be. And in the scene, Maestro says that her powers are like the oldest one.
It's not Ruby, it's the song. The exact quote is, "How could a song have so much power and power like him?" And the doctor's like who? And Maestro's like, the older one. On the
Oh,
night
you're
of her
right.
birth, he can't have been there. What for? What for? What for? And the Maestro kind of like freaks out and then releases Ruby.
Do we think Ruby could be a member of the Pantheon, like the toy maker and the Maestro?
I don't know. I don't
I
know.
guess we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. I've seen people think that she's Susan's daughter,
Oh, interesting.
or she's Susan regenerated,
Oh,
or
that would be crazy.
she's like, we know that the doctor's a Time Lord because he was adopted into the Time Lords, but like
Hmm.
biologically he doesn't know who he is. A lot of people think that she's like the original species he's from.
Maybe.
Some people think she's Rose Tyler's child. I unfortunately don't think so. I would love that though
No, me either.
and hate it.
Yeah.
It would be a love hate. But moving on, after all this, Ruby's dropped by the Maestro. And why
Hmm.
don't you share everything else that happens in this scene?
Well, then the Doctor and Ruby, they kind of have like a music battle, for lack of a better term, of Maestro. And we
Uh-huh.
find out if they can find the right chord, they can basically get rid of Maestro.
Mm-hmm.
So the Doctor's, playing the piano, trying to find the right chord progression, and he's so close. And something that I thought was funny, the Maestro says you'd have to be a genius to find it. And the Doctor's like, well, I would never call myself a genius, except he has multiple times.
Yeah. That part, I was like, Doctor, you lying. You're a liar.
Yeah. Number one rule, the Doctor lies.
Yup.
But then he plays the wrong notes, and he gets trapped in the drums, and Ruby gets trapped in the cello. And right? Was it a cello?
It was, yeah.
Okay, good. And I really liked this scene. I thought it was really intense. I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
really funny, really campy, but it was working really well. And then we talked about this earlier. John and Paul, they come across the piano, and they're able to figure out the chord progression, and they get the final note.
And they save the day. And Ruby and 15 escape. And Maestro starts being pulled back into the piano right before the Maestro goes completely in the piano. The Maestro says, "The one who waits is almost here."
Mm-hmm. So I guess soon we'll. There's so much happen. I can't believe how many mysteries we have this season. RTD is teasing so many things. I'm so curious to see how this is all going to pay off, and I'm really hoping it pays off in a satisfying way, because there's so much hype and so many theories and a lot happening. It's going to be hard to make all of this, the one who waits, the oldest one, the boss, Ruby's parents, the doctor's past. Like, there's so much happening. There's
Mrs.
so much getting
Flood.
teased. Mrs. Flood, thank you. Susan Twist. Like, how is this
There's
all going to
so
get wrapped up in a satisfying way?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be things at play here that have been mentioned in this season that are going to carry off into the next season.
Me
That
too.
is
I
just
don't
a
think it's
very
all going to
strong
get
feeling
wrapped
I have.
up in the finale.
I agree. I don't know if the Susan Twist thing will get wrapped up per se. I think we'll know most of who Susan Twist is by the end of this season.
Yeah, I think that is going to get wrapped up. I could see things like Mrs. Flood and everything going on with the Pantheons kind of continuing into the next season.
I agree. All right, Rebecca, I have a very important question for you. This is something that really divided a lot of fans online that I saw.
Oh, okay.
What were your thoughts on the musical number at the end?
I loved it. I'm always going to support a musical episode, a musical moment. I thought it was funny. The song could be better. Like, it's not my favorite song. Like, I think if you're going to have that moment, it should be something really big. And it wasn't my favorite, but you can't lie. It's still catchy. Haley, I know you've had that stuck in your head all day. And it is a
Yes.
really fun moment. I love the costumes. I love how it's filmed. And yeah, I love it. And I think it's a great way to end the episode. And the doctor's right. There is always a twist at the end.
I agree. I will always love a musical number. I'm not going to lie to you, okay? I don't want a full musical episode ever,
No.
but like a musical number like this, I didn't hate. I do kind of wish it was a little bit shorter. I think if they had cut maybe like 10, 15 seconds, it would have been better, but I will never automatically hate on a musical number. I love musicals. I agree. The song could have been better, but it is so catchy. And yeah, it's interesting because I noticed kind of during this, the doctor winks at the camera. So is the doctor aware he's in a show?
I've seen people talk before about how the doctor has broke the fourth wall. In my head, certain doctors know they're in a show and certain don't. 15, he knows he's in a show. 10 doesn't know. 11 doesn't know. 12, I think, does to an extent.
I could see that.
9 doesn't know.
9 doesn't.
No. The fourth doctor, he knows, maybe even the second doctor. But yeah.
Very interesting all around. I do think the fourth wall breaks are going to lead to somewhere. I don't know where. I don't know. It's just there's been a lot, and it's not just this episode. So we shall see. Wait, is it this episode? I can't remember, guys. Everything's wobbly wobbly in my mind tonight.
Timey-wimey.
Timey-wimey. One last thing before we get into the reviews I wanted to talk about, or if you had anything else to talk about, is the TARDIS. Something's up with our girl.
Okay, explain.
Okay. So when the Doctor and Ruby come back to 1963 from traveling to London in the future, the TARDIS groans. The Doctor even notices this and says along the lines of like, oh, it's fine. We also talked about in the last episode of our podcast about how the TARDIS crash landed in Space Babies, basically, and landed really clunkily on Wild Blue Yonder. And then at the end of the Devil's Chord, Ruby and the Doctor shut the door behind them. I don't know how to fully explain it. It's almost like the door opened and shut again, but like the TARDIS shifted. So something's up with her. Something's up. Ever since
that, I kind of thought that
acting weird.
I kind of thought that last thing with the doors opening was just like part of the musical moment, just like a silly gag. And I think the TARDIS not working was just kind of because it had, it was in the Maestro's universe and they're traveling through different dimensions and all this stuff. So I think that's just the main reason it was having difficulty, because we've seen that before with the TARDIS, but I don't know, maybe there's something bigger to it.
We shall see. I could be completely wrong. So, is there anything else you wanted to talk about from this episode?
I don't think so. I'm ready to get into the reviews. Or what are the people of Reddit saying about this episode?
All right. So I do have 2 actual reviews I have, and then I'm going to read a Reddit comment or 2. Okay, so Stefan Muhammad from Den of Geek said in their review, quote, "All that said, not everything quite worked. Having the Doctor initially running and hiding from Maestro makes sense in context, as he says his last encounter with the being like Maestro took everything. It literally tore my soul in half. I can't survive that again. However, coming immediately after Space Babies, in which the Doctor running and hiding from a monster was used as a plot point specifically because it felt wrong to him, the impact here is somewhat diminished."
I disagree. I did see that criticism after the episode, but in Space Babies, it was involuntarily scared, and obviously we're all involuntarily scared. But the Doctor, he didn't know why he was scared. He just was. With this reason, in this episode with the Maestro, he's scared because it's going back to the toy maker, and the last time he faced the toy maker, it ripped his soul in half, and it was this big moment, and he didn't know if he was going to win. Like we see in the episode how much it facing the toy maker took out of the Doctor. So it was just, to me, those aspects are very different, and they got played very differently. So I didn't think it diminished the impact at all.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I find myself a little in between your opinion and the opinion of this article. Maybe we'll shift with time. I don't know.
Yeah. Once we go through the rest of the show and we eventually get back to these episodes in our rewatch, I think we're going to have a lot of different opinions. So that will be exciting.
It will be exciting. The last article I have is from Blogter Who. And Jamie, sorry, I just love that name. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I love that name. Jamie Mutton said, "Whilst the episode itself was fun and Maestro was exceptional, it would have been nice to learn more about the Beatles. How did they form the group? What became of them? It would have been a great opportunity to educate viewers, particularly younger viewers, on the group themselves. It's apparent that despite the marketing, this was never meant to be a historical in the same vein as Vincent and the Doctor."
I don't know if it was ever advertised as historical like that. Like, I didn't go into this episode fully expecting that. But I do agree, I would have liked to see more done with the Beatles, like I mentioned earlier.
I agree with you. All right, on to Reddit comments. I'll read a couple. We're thinking of doing this every week, actually, with these new episodes, is the Reddit comments.
Yeah, so let us know what you guys think.
Yeah, let us know. User Locomotive Stopper on the Doctor Who subreddit said, "This was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, and I absolutely loved every second. This is the kind of unabashed insanity I need from a 60-year-old show."
Yes, I completely agree.
LXS-408 on the Doctor Who subreddit said, "I adore high concept characters like Maestro. I'm loving the fourth wall breaks. I thought it was unique to Mrs. Flood, but now the Maestro and the Doctor are doing it. I think it's pretty clear that when they said the lines between reality and fiction were disappearing, that also included between the show and reality, which is a wacky twist, and I hope it goes somewhere interesting. I wonder who the oldest is, the oldest of their siblings," and in parentheses, they put children of the Toymaker, "or the oldest of their species. This is the most invested in Doctor Who speculation I've been in a long time, and I'm so excited for this season."
Completely agree. There's more excitement around this season and mystery and intrigue than there's been in a really long time. And I'm having a lot of fun so far.
Same. I'm going to end on this hilarious comment because it made me laugh. User Petty Trash Panda on the Doctor Who subreddit. I love Reddit usernames, guys.
Me too.
They're always the best. said, I'm going to be honest. It feels like someone gave RTD a blank check, an open remit, and a lot of cocaine, and I am here for it. It's absolutely crackers, and I love it, so long as the dark is flying to hit hard when it comes.
I love it. RTD really is just going all for it, and I think that's great.
Yeah, so those are all the reviews and the thoughts, and all in all, I enjoyed this episode. I didn't mind this type of episode. I don't want it to happen super frequently, if that makes sense.
What are your like main hesitations with it? I know we talked a little bit, but summarize.
I think what I mean by that is I like a lot of campiness like this in doses, and a high intensity villain with this sort of whimsical fantasy kind of world that's different than the aliens we typically see. I want to see it more in doses, so one, we don't get sick of it, and two, so it doesn't get old.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but right now I think this is really fresh and really new, and I don't want it to get overused like other villains
Same.
on the show have been overused. But right now I
Same.
think it's really interesting, and it's adding something different to the show.
I completely agree.
What do you think the heart of this episode is?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know.
For me, it's simply the power of music, and that's really all that needs saying.
You know what? You're so smart.
Thank you. So, if you guys have been listening, you know we always like to, at the end of the episode, ask each other what the heart of the episode is. And we decided to include the star of the episode, where we get to say our favorite character, you know, just who we loved in this episode, who's killing it, who's giving a 10 out of 10. So, Haley, who is the star of this episode for you?
This might be controversial. This might be random. I don't know. The star of the episode for me is June Hudson. Am I saying? Why do I keep thinking I'm saying the wrong last
June
name?
Hudson.
Okay, June Hudson. Okay, even though she got killed by the Maestro, she was just so sweet, and I just really liked her. And she was only in like 2 scenes, but she was the star of the show for me.
She was great. To me, the star is no other but the Maestro. Like, I just loved the energy, loved the vibes, loved the costumes, especially the first one with the, you know, piano keys on the collar.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the star for me. All right. I think that wraps us up on The Devil's Chord. We'll be back next week to talk about Stephen Moffat's first episode of Doctor Who since 2017. Boom. And I can't wait to talk about it with you, Haley.
I can't wait.
In the meantime, send all your questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, theories, edits, fan fictions to
TimeyWimeyPod@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok.
at TimeyWimeyPod.
And with all that said, we will talk to you guys next week.
See you next week.
Bye, guys.